For those of you who have been following or keeping up to date with the homeworks and quizzes and readings, there's been a little switcheroo this week. So this is class 6 of ACI course 9. I don't know if you guys have noticed, those of you who've been coming for a while, but class 6 is always a biggie. Always. Course 6 is a biggie. Course 6 is the diamond cutter course. And for some reason, it's pretty consistent through all the ACI courses that class 6 tends to be a doozy. And this is no exception, but interestingly enough, if you're following through and you're looking at your notes and your readings and your homework questions, this will appear to be class 7 in your readings, your notes, and your homeworks. But it's actually class 6, okay? So in your readings, what I'm going to talk to you about tonight will actually be reading 7, not reading 6. And same thing with the homeworks and quizzes, because as soon as you go to homework 1, you're going to say, she never told me that one, because you're going to get it next week. Or is it the other way around? Anyways, there is a switch. So your homework questions, Leonardo, do you actually have your binder with you?
I have the questions.
Yeah, if you just go to the first one of class 6, I think it asks about the different types of births or something like that.
Yeah, just a second. They're not like... Chapter 6.
Class 6.
Sorry, class... Pardon me.
Okay.
That's the homework. Questions.
Yeah, this is...
I'll do it 7.
Yeah, no, the homework 6, talking about the types of people who can take vows. We're not going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about that next week. Okay, so for tonight's class, you need to do what's considered class 7 homework. If you're keeping up weekly. If not, it'll all make sense anyways. But it is a big class because tonight's class is all about karma. So let's just do a quick review for the benefit of those who haven't been with us the whole time. So who can tell me what this course is called? You can read it.
Yeah, I know, I get done by the time, sorry, no excuse. It's called The Ethical Life.
Right. And what does Geshe-la like to call it?
Vinaya? No.
Actually, it is the Vinaya.
Yeah.
But he likes to call it, or why is he teaching this? He's trying to teach you how to live the good life, right? Like how to have good things happen for yourself, how to have good things come to you, how to be happy, basically, is the ultimate goal. I remember in class 1 we clarified that the goal of this particular course is to be clear that we would really like to get out of suffering and that we would like to get to this state that they call nirvana, which is not a place, remember? It's not, because sometimes you hear about nirvana and it sounds like heaven, like a destination, like a geographical location that you would go to, and it's not, right? Remember, it's a state of mind. For all I know, you're all in nirvana already, and I just can't tell because in this moment, I'm not. I will confess to you. Working on it, but you're not going to look any different when you have your cessation of mental afflictions, the thing that bothers the peace of your own mind. However, in order to get there, we need to understand what the causes are, right? And that's the reason to study the Vinaya, which technically Vinaya is but what is Vinaya itself? It's the vows, right? It's the monastic vows. Although we know it's not just monastic vows. So don't worry, you're not all going to become monks and nuns necessarily after this class, okay? I say necessarily because there are several people who do pursue that, interestingly enough, for all the right reasons. But and actually, we don't specifically talk about monks and nuns' vows because I'm not ordained and I don't know what you're not allowed to know what those vows are until you actually are ordained. We covered that last time too, right? But we're being given a really, really beautiful flavor of what they are. And last week, was it last week or the week before that I told you guys to listen to the knowledge-based teaching on Samaya, where it was from the Great Retreat Teachings last spring, where Geshe-la did this beautiful overview and the most in-depth overview I have ever heard of the actual Vinaya monk's vows. So if any of you missed that and want the link, I think you two have the link that you can email. Okay, so see either Leonardo or Joyce, or actually Yulia, you've got the link too, right? Yeah. So
I started listening. Wow.
it's stunning, really, really stunning.
Amazing.
And again, that whole teaching, if you look at the website, says nothing really about vows. It just says if you want to know the secret to seeing emptiness directly and being happy, right? Easy. Easy peasy. Just do this and you'll get there. So tonight's class, the official class 6, not the written class 6, is going to be about the basics of Vinaya. Oh, another thing I want to tell you about Vinaya. The word itself is Dolwa in Tibetan, and it means discipline, right? It means like to tame. They use the same word Dolwa in the context of training a wild horse. So it's like reining in our own mind is what we're trying to learn how to do. So the basis of Vinaya practice, for those of you who have been coming for a while and are keeping your book, are the classic 10 non-virtues. Okay? So we're going to use that as a foundation of, so for some of you it's going to be review, and for some of you it's going to be new, but this is the basic 10, they call them non-virtues because they're written in a way that it's like the thou shalt nots, I guess, you know, it's, and every authentic spiritual lineage has some version of this. It's not unlike the 10 Commandments. It's not unlike the Boy Scout code, actually. It's, you know, there's some very, very pragmatic and practical reasons why these 10 are like the foundation of ethics and morality, basically, at the end of the day. So let's do a bit of a review. For those of you who have been coming for a while, you know that there's 3 of the body, 4 of speech, and 3 of mind. Okay, that's how it breaks down to the 10. So what are the 3 of body? And we say it as the non-virtue. So we say not to do this. So no
killing,
no killing,
stealing, no sexual misconduct.
Yep. And then the 3 of the speech.
No lying, no harsh words, no divisive talk.
And there's one more.
And no eye.
Yep. And then the 3 of the mind.
Being happy
When
others get
what
they
don't want.
don't want, being unhappy when others
Get what they do want.
what
Yeah.
they do want,
Yeah.
corrective
Wrong view. Yeah, so ill will, coveting, and wrong view. So that's the laundry list, but what we're going to do today is really unpack them and get really specific with what they mean, because again, for those of us who have been keeping our book for a while, it kind of becomes automatic and we gloss over them, you know, and we think we know them and we think we're doing them, but hey, if you have any irritation in your mind, if you have any sense of discomfort or unhappiness at any point of your day, at some point we haven't perfected it yet. Okay, so we're gonna go through it again. And it's interesting, Geshe Michael, we call him Geshe for short, spends a lot of time in this class really going through the nuances, the subtle differences between some of these things that you might not have considered before. So it's, Leonardo, was it last week after class you were asking me a more practical way to do the 6-time book and how it would be really great to have a more in-depth breakdown, and we were talking about maybe workshopping it.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Here's the foundation for your workshop, okay?
Okay.
Because Geshe actually lays it out for you in terms of, at least for the 10 non-virtues. It'll give you something to as a leaping board for the bodhisattva vows and all of that, okay? So let's get clear on what the non-virtues are. So the first one of body says no killing. Kind of makes sense, right? Remember from the karma course number 5, that a karma, which is a cause, which will bring you a result, isn't considered a complete karma unless it has four things present. They call it the four chains, right? It really, really is important to have powerful motivation in order to make a karma strong. So we're talking about the things to not do. So if you're going to really nail this one and send yourself down to the lowest of births, then you will do this with a very strong premeditation and a strong motivation. Remember, this applies for the good karmas too, right? Like if you're protecting life with a really powerful intent, way stronger than just accidentally protecting life. They're both good, but one is much more powerful. So for killing, to have it be a full karmic path, you do have to have the intention, the premeditation. You have to be very clear who and what your object is. You have to undertake the act, and you have to see it complete. So Geshe gives this example of if you're in a shootout. He was talking about like the shootout at OK Corral or something. If you're in a shootout and you have your sights on the other person and who you want to like off, and you're gonna shoot them, but they shoot you first. Like you both shoot each other. Your intent was to shoot them, but you die first. It's an incomplete karma because you didn't actually complete the deed. Okay, it sounds silly, but there's a reason he gives that. There has to be the motivation. There has to be the completion. Okay, and it's still a partial karma. It's still not a good thing if you were intending to and you executed the action. Just because you didn't see the final result doesn't mean that you didn't collect karma. It's just not quite as powerful as if you were doing it with the actual full chains in place, okay? But that's actually not the point. What Geshe wants us to be really clear on is what is defined by the scriptures as killing. So the types of killing. So for one, of course, it is taking any human life with full intent, but according to Buddhism, abortion is a kind of killing. Suicide is another type of killing. And contributing to a war effort that causes the killing of others is still killing. You get as much of a karmic hit as if you actually did the deed yourself. The thing about abortion is that according to Buddhist scriptures, the sentient being exists at the moment of conception. Whereas, you know, there's a cultural influence or a cultural education, I guess, or lack thereof, where a society may decide that there is no being there until X number of months, right? If you truly do not believe that there is a being there, then it's not as powerful of an act. But if you're an educated Buddhist, it says that it happens at the moment of conception. So there is, that would be a complete deed. Suicide is a type of killing according to Buddhism because this is your most precious vehicle for getting to enlightenment. And anything you do to harm it is a non-virtue. So the opposite of that is that you should do everything you can to ensure that it's healthy and strong and protected so that you can get the job done. And once you take higher vows, you're actually vowing to not put this at risk. And that can mean a whole lot of things, right? So it's interesting, the concentric circles. The contributing to having someone else do the killing is an interesting one. Geshe says that, you know, we have a societal obligation, an ethical obligation to pay our taxes if we're in a nation that collects taxes. But he says that there is such a thing as being a conscientious objector, and that when he does his taxes, he writes a letter that says, I do not want this money to go towards weapons. And whether it does or not then is beyond his control, but at least he has taken a stand. And I have to admit, I've never done that. I've never written that in my taxes, but it's an interesting step, to consider, to be that aware of what the ramifications of actions are, actually. So those are the three that he specifically talks about. And again, killing in and of itself, right? We also have to remember the same time we're talking about karma, which is the cause of things, we have to understand emptiness. That even karma is not self-existent. Karma is not something that comes at you. Karma is something that we plant, we project, and then the result returns to us. So killing in and of itself, done with the right intention, for the right purposes, for the highest good of everyone involved, might actually be a virtue. And we have the Jataka tales, right? We have the tales of Buddha's former life, where he basically assassinated the captain of a ship. No, he was the captain of a ship. He assassinated one person on that ship who he could read his mind, knew that person was about to murder everybody on that ship. Who did he protect in that instant?
Everybody. Didn't he project on the people in the ship?
That's what it appears, isn't it?
And the person who was about to kill.
Oh, he protected him too, that's right.
Because
And
everybody
Lord's
on the
karma,
boat,
that's right.
if they had the karma to be killed, it would happen to them sooner or later. But the person he really protected was the
man.
potential murderer, right?
That's right.
It's interesting. But he did it by killing him, because he had the power to send him off to a higher, to a better incarnation, to a better place. But you have to be, there's a lot, you can't just decide that you've got that power. You have to have been a practicing bodhisattva for eons, countless eons. And remember from the last course, that was what, 10 with 60 zeros behind it? Times, anyways, it's a lot of years. And there also has to be no other alternative. Like on that boat, there was no other alternative to keep the rest of the ship safe, right? So, and it wasn't Lord Buddha in the Buddha state. It was a previous life where he was a really high bodhisattva with a lot of siddhis, a lot of powers, a lot of extraordinary abilities. So, but that is given as an example where the act of killing in and of itself, so it's not so cut and dried in terms of labels, right? Although, let's be really, really clear, like the motivation is, there's no gray areas in the motivation. So, Geshe-la makes an interesting comment. These audios were done back in the 90s, the first time this class was taught ever. And he was really talking about the United States, but the same could be said of any Western world. In the Western world, we're really, really fortunate to have democracy. We're really, really fortunate to have freedom of speech and a lot of civil rights, a lot of human rights that aren't available everywhere else in the world. But he did make a comment that it's sad that he was talking about America, but I think in North America, very, very often we respond to, or the first instinct is to respond to violence with violence. Like someone attacks your borders, you're going to go attack them back. And he reminds us that we need to remember that bodhisattva concept of thinking of everyone as having been your mother. And there is another Buddhist story that if your mother in this life, regardless of whether you got along or not, but she gave birth to you, okay? So if nothing else, she endured 9 months or more of personal putting herself second and then making sure you were alive. Now, if in this same lifetime that same mother became insane and went after you with a knife, your first response isn't going to be to shoot her, right? You're going to try and restrain her and disarm her and get her some help. And Geshe-la says if we could just remember that all beings have been our mother, then, you know, it would go far in terms of not responding to violence with violence. It's actually what Jetsun Kappa says too. Suicide, I said, was a non-virtue, right? Because you're not supposed to endanger this precious vehicle that you have. But again, to point out a previous life of Lord Buddha, there's a story when in one incarnation he was a prince and he was playing with his brother, another prince. And at some point they come across a starving mother lion and her cubs. And these animals are going to die if they don't eat. And he actually gives up his own life to feed the mother lion and her cubs. The story goes that he did it with a very, very direct motivation, complete love, and with the knowledge that these beings would actually come back as his students. And as the story goes, when Lord Buddha became enlightened, the very first, those ascetics, do you guys know the story where he actually lived with a group of ascetics before he reached enlightenment, and it was too severe? Like it was too extreme. And then he finally finds his enlightenment in meditation under the Bodhi tree. But after he's enlightened, these ascetics are the first beings that he comes across, and they actually they become his first monks, his first devotees, his first students. They are the reincarnation of that mother lion and her cubs. So when you do the timeline back, there was definitely a higher motivation. Was it suicide at that point in time? Yes, but it wasn't. It was absolutely without any of the mental afflictions or the motivations that we would normally think behind it. It was an absolute offering. So, again, just to not label one way or the other. And the third one was stealing, right? Or the second one was stealing. Killing was the first one. So killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. So stealing is stealing anything of value, taking anything that's not freely given, and anything that is of value to the person who it belongs to. In the scriptures, they actually give it a number, but it's a karpashana, and that currency does not exist anymore. So we don't give it a specific value. But now the concentric circles around what defines stealing is any sort of shortchanging, underpaying, cheating when it comes to money, not paying your bills, that sort of thing is concentric circles. Sexual misconduct, the scriptures do say this refers mainly to adultery with someone else's spouse, but then they get really specific with the particular type of actually they get very graphic, very, very graphic with what constitutes sexual misconduct. And this is in the Vinaya. This has to do with certain parts of the body and certain types of people it's appropriate or not appropriate to engage with. It, for example, it has to do with, like it's not all right to have sexual relations with someone who is too young. A lot of it depends on the customs of the country in terms of what defines that, right? Because if you go historically, like to the human race, there was a time when people didn't live beyond 35 or 40, and basically what, 12, 14, 15 was considered marrying age, right? So, and yet in this day and age that's completely taboo. So it's societal pressures change that. They define excessive sex as more than 5 times in a day, I guess is what they
say in a day.
yeah.
I think we're too busy.
Exactly. But remember last week they defined how to make a fully ordained nun as if there was a fully ordained monk and he changed sex once. And it's in the scriptures that you can change your sex twice but not 3 times. It's actually in the scriptures, and we had this discussion about, wow, like it must have been happening a lot in ancient India because it's not something you normally hear about in this day and age. They talk about the time of day. They talk about whether it's in an appropriate place. Inappropriate places, by the way, are temple grounds, your altar room, or in the presence of or near your lama. Okay, just so you know. Yeah, it's very, very specific and graphic. And if you listen to the audio of the class afterwards, you will get a big laundry list of what is in the actual Vinaya. And again, a lot of what Geshe-la says in this section, because he gets very specific, very, very graphic and very, very specific. It's not because he wants anyone to feel bad. It's about just knowing what the causes of happiness or unhappiness are, and to be very, very clear about what the intentions and motivations are. And bad deeds don't always look bad. So it has a lot to do with motivation. It has a lot to do with the reasons behind things. Some of these, what we're going to get into later in this class, is actually the karmic correlations. What I'm defining right now is the textbook definition of why this particular act or speech or thought is considered a bad deed according to the Vinaya. And then we're going to talk about the correlations. Because it's not bad in and of itself, as we've already described with the act of killing and suicide, right? But and each case, there can always be a reason why it would happen for the right reasons, as opposed to the wrong reasons. But we don't often think about these in depth. So it's a really interesting thing to think that it's not being told to us as a judgment, it's being told to us so that we can get really, really clear on the virtue. We're being told the non-virtue so that we can get very, very clear on what the virtue would be, right? The actual causes. Because the non-virtue is what has been causing us all our pain, and we've just forgotten. Or we don't think about it, that we've done these things. And as you know from the second class, a lot of what we're told not to do is actually from the Buddha's previous life. He tells us these stories of what not to do, and then says, oh, by the way, that was a previous life of mine. So it's not cautionary tales just for the sake of scaring us. That's not what it's about. It's about just being very, very clear and honest with what the causes and conditions are. Oh, the adultery thing. They do say in the scriptures that it's not to have relations with someone's spouse, meaning married. But in this day and age, that includes living together. That if two people believe they're committed, If one person in that committed relationship believes they're committed, then it's still adultery. What my teachers say is that if you're wondering if you're stepping on the boundary of this, the biggest sort of check-in is whatever you're saying or doing or thinking, well, I guess not thinking, saying or doing with the one person who you want to be with, would you say and do those things if their partner were there right beside them? And if you wouldn't, then it's very clear that it's a misconduct. So basically, you should be able to say and do whatever with both parties there, and that would be a little test. I will quote Geshe-la. There is no problem with recreational sex between consenting adults who are not committed to other people. But then the next line he says is about celibacy, because he actually speaks about the power of celibacy. There is actually a one-day celibacy vow that anyone can take. There's also varying degrees. Of course, if you were a fully ordained monastic, that's one of the things that are intrinsic within the monastic system, right? Remember, was it last week or the week before we went through the nuns' vows? And there was a whole section. We didn't actually get to hear what the vows were, but they were all about celibacy, right, in terms of the general context. There is a mental and physical health benefit for even short amounts of celibacy, because it's an energy. It's an energy that would otherwise be dissipated. And sometimes in a meditative practice, it's a very powerful energy that you can harness. It's really interesting that in the scriptures, in the Buddhist scriptures, they don't actually mention that the purpose of sex is to procreate. That's actually not, the purpose of sex is to harness the sexual energy, and it's not about, like, the reason for not doing it, for all the wrong reasons, is because of the ethics and morality, but the reason for doing it properly is not covered in this course. But in the scriptures, one of the reasons it mentioned is not to procreate. It's interesting. That just happens to be a byproduct of what happens, I guess, but it's not. Whereas I think in other philosophies, well, the whole, right, you get married to have kids. So anyways, that's not something that is in the Buddhist scriptures. Jason Kappa says that the mores of your society do play a part in what is acceptable or not. So we do have to honor that. Most of that laundry list of misconduct is, again, not because anything is good, bad, or otherwise in and of itself, but that they hurt you, that they are a cause that will result in an effect that will hurt you. Okay, so the 4 of speech, there was the lying, right? That was one of the first ones of speech. The definition of lying, according to the scriptures, is to give someone a wrong impression. And lying about what you've seen, heard, or know. That's a little bit different, right? Giving someone a different impression. Because maybe what you're actually saying isn't wrong. Maybe what you're actually saying are truthful words, but if you lead the person to believe something other than what you understand by those words, it's considered lying.
What about mortgages and unpaid, visas, that people have all these, it looks like they have all these things, but they're living on credit. Is that a form of lying?
That's a form of stealing.
Oh.
Remember that was covered earlier? And you know what? I confess I've done it.
I understood that visa wasn't your money, but I didn't see it as.
I know, we don't see it
Stealing.
as stealing, right?
I see it more as giving the wrong impression that you have. These
Yeah, some of
things,
these are
but
some of
maybe
these
they're
are a
wrong.
little bit gray.
Yeah.
If you're not paying your visa bill, it is a form of. Well, here's an interesting thing. And Geshe-la has spoken very strongly about this. And I actually admit I have done this. I have used credit to make a donation that I haven't been able to pay back right away. And you know what? I've actually suffered the consequences of that karmically through scarcity. Like that's the result. We're going to get to that in a sec. But the result of taking what's not yours is that you will experience future scarcity. I can attest to that. It happens. And so there are levels, obviously, and intention and motivation. I mean, my intent to help a virtuous Dharma project was a good intention. I was just misguided in the way I thought I could go about it, right? So he specifically talks about not paying your bills in the context of stealing, but it has to do with your motivation.
So if you are making monthly payments, at least you're not getting further in the hole.
Exactly. And you're trying to honor a commitment, right? So, but the lying would be more taxes. Yeah, if you lie, saying you have dependents when you don't,
Right.
to collect, you know what I mean? Like it's, and you may get the refund, or you may get the not having to pay a certain amount. But remember, those are unconnected. That little windfall you got and the lying are not connected. It's not the lying that got you the windfall. Because the same person, not the same person, the same lie could be told and the person could be caught and audited and blah, 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 right? It's not from the act. That lying will result in your future being very unpleasant, and we're going to get into the actual causes that lying brings you in a sec. But the windfall came from a past act of generosity. It's the only way it could have come to you, right? So that's why we want to get really clear on the cause and effect of things. Okay, but lying is mostly, the strongest is about giving this wrong impression. Now, it begs the question, what about when you're trying to be kind? Like, what if someone comes in with a god-awful purple and whatever polka-dotted dress and asks you, like, do you like my dress? And what are you supposed to say? Like, you don't want to hurt their feelings. And that's actually a justification most people give, right? I don't want to hurt their feelings. I will hurt their feelings if I tell them the truth. Geshe-la says there's always something nice you can say without lying. And like, that's a really bright color. Or, it's just, and then he says, if you can't think of anything, do the ultimate, drop a cup. Or say these magic words. I need to go to the bathroom. Yeah. Yeah. Because that's not a lie. Like, you actually, everybody does have to go to the bathroom, right? Yeah, it's interesting.
Comb your hair, right?
It's interesting. Again, remember those 4 chains, right? Or the 4, actually there's a whole lot of laundry lists of things that make things powerful or not. With karma, there's definitely the 4 chains, but there's also the object, right? There's the levels, the hierarchy of the object to whom you're actually doing the karma, doing the deed, doing the thought. And for example, lying to your dog is not as powerful as lying to your mama or your mother. Like there's different degrees of karmic weight to the recipient of your actions. Which one was that? Lying?
Yes.
Okay, so the next one is divisive talk. Divisive talk is often translated as slander, but Geshe-la wants to clarify that slander usually means that you talk bad about somebody, right? And divisive talk isn't that necessarily. It might include that. But divisive is, it divides people. So if your speech divides two people, again, even if what you're saying is true, but if the intent is to bring two people further apart, then it's divisive talk. And the intention, the motivation for it to be divisive is that you're not saying what you're saying to enlighten the person you're talking to, but to make sure that they like the other person a little bit less, or they think a little less highly of the person that you're speaking about, right? They also say that these things are in the top 10 because we do them a lot. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the top 10. It's interesting, to be in the company of someone who's been practicing these for a while. I think I've said it before, but there's a lot of half-started sentences, a lot of catching oneself in the middle of something because you realize as it's coming out of your mouth that, oh my God, I'm doing this, that, or whatever. It's also interesting to observe the results. You're getting there, Leonardo. You are. Actually, this class is going to be very enlightening because we're going to get to the causes or the results in just a sec.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is so perfect.
And remember that, well, maybe you don't remember, but they say we have 84,000 variations of wrong deeds that we can commit. Somebody counted them up. There's 84,000. And of them, these are the top 10. So if you can get rid of these top 10, you will go far to eliminating a lot of those others. Because a lot of the 84,000 or the 83,990 would be related to these top 10. Did I do the math right? I'm not very good at math. But, okay, thank you. Our treasurer over there.
We used to think of beauty pageant, the top 10 on stage, and then we're going to get the word it down.
So, yeah, no, the speech thing, it's really, really interesting. Because, it's so insidious and it's so subtle. First of all, we communicate by talking, so it's something that we're constantly doing. But even tomorrow, watch your speech. See how often what you say is to either make yourself look better to somebody, or to be liked, or to be critical, or just watch it. It's not even, I'm not even saying don't judge it, just watch it and just observe. It's really, really interesting when we observe our speech, how often we say things that if you actually could hear yourself say what you say, you wouldn't be saying it. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. It's an interesting exercise to do. And that's just my little suggestion. That's not homework, but it's a useful thing to do every once in a while. Geshe-la says, if you get good at watching your speech, you will shut up a lot. Sorry, Alvaro. You had a question?
Yes, still I do, what is it? Mukha Bandha. I shut up, but
It's a very, very important yoga pose. It's a yoga asana. What does it mean, Alvaro? What does Mukha Bandha mean? Mukha is
mouth.
And Bandha is shut it.
Shut it.
Yeah. Lock, right?
Yes,
Like it's
lock.
the...
On the root.
Lama Marut's famous, the asana that he created, Mukha Bandha. Do you find yourself doing that a lot?
A lot. Today I had a situation at work that, and I know it's coming from me. It's just there's no way to be judging. Still, I'm like,
There it is,
there,
right?
there
Yeah.
it is. So I guess it's purifying.
It is. No, you're absolutely right. That's the other reason it's useful to start watching, because, yeah, in the moment, you can't change the moment in the moment. You can't. It's the ripening. It's what Lama Marut also calls dried cement, right? And it's a ripening. Now, we can actually, in that moment, make it worse by reacting badly. We can make it better if we knew in that instant what antidote to do, but if we're not quite there yet, even just Mukha Bandha, that's pretty powerful to be able to stay and observe. That's really, really powerful. It goes far to purifying that. And yes, when it's happening, it's a ripening. But it's not a purification until we actually have the right reaction, right? Like if we have the bad reaction, then we've replanted that cause. So we haven't purified it. We've actually put fertilizer on it. So, but you're right. It's really, really interesting and good for you, because it's not so easy. It's the hardest thing to do. You know, Master Shantideva, who wrote The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which, by the way, we're going to be covering that whole book in the next 3 courses. ACI 10, 11, and 12 are the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. He says, right, like the first layer of response when you're dealing with any of these things, when you're dealing with battling your own mind, is to just be a bump on a log, right, which is the Mukha Bandha thing. Just wait, just watch. Lamaji has also taught us that if you really, really feel ill-equipped to even do that, get yourself out of the situation. Like, don't aggravate the situation if you know that you don't quite have the capacity. Go back to the spiritual gym. Work up your understanding of causes and emptiness. And then when that thing happens again, because it will, if you haven't purified the karma, you will be better equipped. You'll be able to do the Mukha Bandha or the bump on the log. And eventually, you'll be able to either work the antidote right away, or eventually you will have purified it and it won't happen the same way. Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so harsh speech. That was one of the downfalls of speech also, right? And harsh, just the same way as divisive, can be words that actually are true, but they still split people up. Harsh speech can actually be sweet sounding words spoken with ill intent. Like it doesn't actually just have to be somebody yelling and screaming to be harsh speech. It can be sarcasm with malice. And yet sarcasm in and of itself, right, for those of you who know what prasangika is not a bad thing. Our particular lineage, our particular school of Gelugpa is the prasangikas, and it's called the absurdist school because we come to wisdom through debate by pointing out the absurdity in our opponent's statement. And so it sounds at one level like we're using sarcasm, but it's not sarcasm with ill intent. It's actually to point out the ludicrousness of a wrong idea, to get people to a higher wisdom. I'm digressing here. This is not part of the Karma Lung, but it's actually a pitch for you guys to attend debate practice, which will happen in between the ACI courses, okay? And actually, it's good to do debate even amongst yourselves while you're doing your homework and stuff. It's a really, really great way to learn the material. So even sweet words. Geshe-la gives the example of, in a retail environment, it's automatic that people say, have a nice day. Sometimes they could actually mean just get out of here. You're holding up the line, but they'll just say, have a nice day. So depending on what the intent is, that those sweet words can actually be harsh speech because the intention is ignorant or wrong, right? So, the other example is a parent who will scream at their child when they see them in a very dangerous situation and they physically can't get to them fast enough to protect them. They may sound harsh, but they're actually coming purely out of love and protection. So that very same vocal tone, word, whatever, is not a bad deed in that case, right? So again, just to be very, very clear that a lot of what causes a karma to be a non-virtue is the intent, is the motivation behind it. In fact, that brings up another thing that lamas are really good about doing, which is there is a difference between anger and wrath. There is, because the most of the scriptures say that there isn't a really useful purpose for anger. It's just a harmful emotion, unless it's anger at your own anger, to destroy the fire of that. But wrath, which looks very much like anger on the outside, comes from a very pure place of motivation. It comes from that sense of wanting to really help and protect, and it comes from a place of pure love. And it's one of the modes of a lama. So it's not always necessarily the outward appearance that dictates whether it's good or bad. Idle speech, right, Joyce? That was the one that we almost forgot. Idle speech. So the classic definition of idle speech is like water cooler talk, like, just gossiping around the water cooler, talking about, well, any type of the infotainment that we get on TV or radio. A lot of that is idle talk. But the interesting thing is that idle talk can be defined as idle whether it's towards an animate or an inanimate object. So if you're muttering away as it's if you're muttering to yourself, it's considered idle talk. One of the worst forms of idle talk is if you're actually a spiritual practitioner and you're just like rattling off your prayers without thinking about them. They say mantras. Doing mantras mindlessly is one of the most dangerous forms of idle speech. So idle speech, I'm going to give you the laundry list, includes words spoken in arguments, criticisms, dispute, reciting useless texts, useless joking, whining, complaining, or kvetching. Geshe-la actually says kvetching. Kvetching is, I think it's a Hebrew slang for complaining. Yeah. It's like whining, whinging.
I'm
Yeah.
so thirsty. So, that anecdote? Miroji.
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically wasting time is what idle talk is. Wasting time talking about politics, sex crimes, sports would qualify. But yeah, the worst is if you have a practice where you're reciting prayers or mantra, to do it without thinking about them.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really a question. I sometimes, or not sometimes, often mix up idle talk with divisive speech. I guess in my own mind, this is helping me to make the distinction stronger. But the complaining here, I complain about, or just...
Well, okay. So complaining could be both, right? Like if you're
Mm.
complaining about a person to another person,
That's,
and the intent is to divide them, that's divisive. But the actual complaining part, if you're just going on and on and on and on and on, is
yeah.
idle.
Okay. I think I've got the word wasteful is helpful. Key.
And the thing with the divisive is remember the divide part.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the splitting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm.
Seems obvious now.
But see, it's not so obvious unless you actually dissect it. Like, on one hand, this may seem like so much detail. Like, why am I going into such minute detail? But it's because most of the time we do um, the 10 non virtues without even knowing we're doing them because we're not actually thinking about it. Okay, so.
So would it be considered lying to like not say something as well?
Again, remember the motivation. But if you're not saying something and it gives the person a wrong impression, it would be classified as lying. But again, check your motivation because the thing about it is, yes, it would still be lying, but if your motivation was truly to protect and out of great love and kindness, then the virtue of that wish will help to mitigate the karma of lying will still be there, but it won't be as severe as if you were purposely withholding the truth because you didn't want that person to know the truth and that it was somehow serving, like it's for personal gain or for out of malice towards the person, or like, see, intent matters. So it really depends on why you would withhold information. So, and it's interesting too, right? Because just being like verbal diarrhea, to be completely honest about something, if you absolutely know it's going to devastate someone and cause irreparable damage, that's not a virtue either, right? So you do have to check your motivation, but you have to be really, really honest because we can be really, really convenient about our, we can justify because if we really were honest, it's because we don't want to be looked badly upon or we want to be thought kindly of, and it's not actually for the other person. So there is a real, it gets tricky, the more sort of educated we get in this stuff. But at the end of the day, the question always is, what is the best? What is the best thing for the most amount of people? What is this if I put my own ego aside and really think about the other person? What is the best thing here? And then if it is to withhold, see, the other thing, the question, here's a good example, and this is actually out of the Geshe-la's teachings. If someone comes running to your door and says, "There's people chasing me. You got to save me. They're going to take me away. They're going to kill me," and I didn't do, like, whether they did anything wrong or not, like, they're in dire danger, and you help them, and then right after the guys come banging on the door and say, like, "Did you see so and so? Like, are they here?" And you lie. You say no. That's actually to protect the person. In fact, Lamaji gives an even more harsh example. Basically, he uses the whole Nazi thing, right? Like he says, like if a refugee comes to you and needs assistance, and then the people who want to like basically incarcerate them and murder them and all of that come, you're going to lie to protect them. And do you still collect the karma of lying? Yes, but the karma of protecting life is so much greater that it mitigates the other one. So like that, you have to be really, really clear on it, and
White
that's
lie.
the tricky part.
White lie?
White lie, same thing. Like, it's better to not lie at all. So it's better to do try to find something truthful you can say, as opposed to, right? Like, that's the purple polka dotted dress example. Like, you don't have to say I love your dress if you really don't. Like, don't. But you can find something else to say to the person that isn't lying. Because actually you do still collect the karma, but it's not as bad as if you were going to be ruthless and malicious. And yeah, so the intent does matter. The withholding is a really interesting thing though, and I find that sometimes that's trickier than the blatant lying, the blatant not lying, because sometimes the not telling someone something can happen without you realizing you just did that.
We can kind of let someone run off.
Exactly.
To like in front of the bus, right? Like this morning, and I was in the gym, and this guy came in to the change room, and I know him, and he was loud, and he was swearing, and I knew it was gonna go happen, but I didn't have the energy, and I felt like, I should probably say something like just for your own good, bring it down, because, and yeah, sure enough, someone came in, like from that runs the gym, say something, but I mean, it went on for like 5 minutes. Like it wasn't like a quick instance where,
Right.
because I saw it, and then I just let it go, and actually I couldn't hear anything he said because I was so focused on how much he needed to stop. But I just thought I'll just let him. Yeah.
Well, actually, it's interesting that you recognize that that was a non-virtue. The interesting thing too is on one level, that's actually your karma ripening for having passed, you know what I mean? Like the fact that you had to hear that is actually the clearing of when at some point you might have done a similar thing at a much lesser way because karma grows. And so in a way, yay for you, like that purified because you didn't actually yell at him back, or you didn't like go to him and go rah 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 rah, right? Like you actually let that ripen. That's what Alvaro was talking about earlier. But the desire to really wish he would not hurt himself is also a really, really good virtue. And in a situation like that, sometimes the best thing is to just let your karma ripen. When you are, as you say, more able to deal with it, probably one of the scenarios that might come up is that you could go up to a person like that and engage them, like change the subject, where you ask them a question or something that gets their mind off of whatever they're ranting about. And that's just what we call skillful means. You start to develop that for yourself because you're coming out of a place of love. But rather than needing to stop them or to change them in any way, you just hit the off switch in a way, And, a good way to start training for that, because it's no different than training in the gym physically. This is what Lamaji says, right? Like we're in the Dharma gym right now. We are flexing our wisdom muscles and we're trying to get them stronger. And a good way to practice is in contemplation, in meditation. So when you've got some alone time and some quiet time, to revisit that whole gym scenario and play it out in a way of the various options that you might have had. It's not a judgment, it's just to go back and say, okay, if I understood in the instant what this person really needed, what would that look like? And see yourself doing that thing, right? Like it's a really interesting way to train your mind to go there and to not judge. Like to not judge that person for being right, wrong, or otherwise, because that might have been somebody in disguise pretending to be this afflicted person so that you could recognize it and that you could see the harm that it causes and that you could figure out what not to do, right? So it's interesting. Like these beings come into our lives to teach us lessons. So, but in contemplation and meditation, we call it taking it to the cushion. Instead of taking it to the mats or you take it to the cushion and you wrestle with it in your mind. And you work out the different scenarios, and you have this debate with like the devil and the angel, right? And it's knowing what you know of karma and consequences. You have those types of inner dialogue, and I promise you, you will have more and more outward manifestations of where you will have the capacity You will know exactly what's needed, and you'll know when it's not needed. You'll know when the mukha bandha is absolutely the right thing to do.
You
And it
mean
sounds to me,
empathy?
empathy is a big part of it. Empathy is a big part of it. Empathy is another word for love, really, you know? And we get to the place of compassion where we actually, you know, your heart goes out to this poor being who is like causing themselves such pain. But then you also get to the point where you recognize the mirror, like you
That's right.
recognize the reflection. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I felt like there's like a real push-pull
Yeah.
there, like where it's like, yeah, like I kind of want to watch the guy run off. And then there's the other part that's like, yeah, exactly what you said, like, yeah, he's in rough shape.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, weird to see too, right?
Yeah.
To see those two things happening at the same time, like without barely any space between those two things, like kind of wishing ill will,
Yeah.
and then on the other side of that, kind of going like, whoa, like you just thought that, and then seeing it for what it is.
Yeah. But you're doing exactly the little mini homework assignment I give. You're catching, you're watching, right? You're catching yourself, and it's interesting. The more awareness you bring to that, and initially sometimes it feels like our minds are just, whoops, that, right? But it's not. It's just that you're noticing, and good for you for noticing. And it takes a lot of courage to notice, because it's easy to let them run off. Like it's easy to let your mind run off, right? But that doesn't mean that we need to. It's really, really important to remove judgment from it. It's really important to be able to cultivate compassion and empathy without judging that he's wrong or he's bad or this is, you know, inexcusable in some way. Like it's a balance, but that also doesn't mean to ignore it if you have the capacity to help, you know. But that's what we're training for. We're training so that we can be helpers and not helpees, and it's a process. That's why they call it a practice. And it's oftentimes it will be catching it after the fact, and that's where the Dharma gym is really useful. Like play it over on your cushion and work out the scenarios, and you'll never be in that exact situation again, but you'll be in a similar one. And you know, next time you might have a different insight about it. Yeah, nice work though. Okay, so the three of the mind, right? The one is coveting, where this is actually the unhappy about happy, because you want what others have, like you wish it for yourself, and this isn't just even about possessions. This could be about someone's intelligence, or their health, or their fame, or even their, this is actually something that Dharma people can get into, where you're jealous of someone because they have more students than you, or they have a bigger audience coming to their, or they, you know, or it's insidious. It's this whole, it's mired in competitiveness and this wanting something for yourself instead of the other, and it's so counterproductive. But Jason Kappa actually mentions 5 conditions around this particular non-virtue. He says that the state of mind always involves these 5 conditions. First, you are very attached to your own possessions or characteristics that you think you already have. Secondly, you wish you had more. Thirdly, you find out someone else has what you think you want. Fourth, you think that it would be a really good idea if you had them yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want them to not have it. It just means that you want it for yourself. And 5, your desire reaches such a point that you can't stop yourself from actually thinking in the wrong way or doing the wrong thing to get this thing that you so desperately think you need. Those are the 5 things in place for it to be a non-virtue. And Jitsun Kappa also says that you also have no shame about this motivation. So that's another way of looking at the 5 chains, right? Or the 4 chains. 4 chains? 5 chains? I get that mixed up all the time. We should check. Somebody check, please, what the 4 chains of karma are. This is the 5. He gives us 5 here, though. Anyways, basically the shame and consideration thing is really interesting. This has come up in other courses where if you have shame is when you feel badly, that you've done something wrong, that you don't want to see yourself in that way. Consideration is when you don't want others to see you in that way. Like you don't do a bad thing because you're considering the mental state of others, and you don't want them to be disturbed by you doing a bad thing. So, but if you have both of those things, where you're concerned for your own behavior and you're concerned for what others think, then it keeps you from doing these things, right? So the other one, the flip side of that, is ill will, where you are happy when others don't get what they want, or when they fail in some way. And it's a sick pleasure. And you know, very early on in my Dharma career, I remember the moment I caught myself thinking this, and it was so innocuous, like it was so minor, and yet I realized it was a form of ill will. I saw somebody getting towed, and I had this fleeting feeling like, ha, he got his, you know? But in that same instant, I caught myself thinking, oh my God, I just wished ill on somebody. Like, I know what it feels like to have my car towed. Like, who would wish that on anyone, even if he was parked in the wrong place? You know what I mean? It's like, but I had that ripening. I had that thought come up, and I watched it, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. But I had that moment of, but it's so innocuous. Like, those types of thoughts can happen without you even realizing it, right? And that would be a form of ill will. And all the way up the spectrum. Basically, you're pleased when others fail. I think that's a tough one in society if you think if someone deserves ill luck, or, you know, like there's this thing it goes along with the gossip columns and the celebrity magazines and stuff. Like, the general public seems to love to tear down their heroes, and there's this sick fascination with the downfalls and the debauchery and the missteps of celebs, right? Like, and it's another form of that infotainment, but that is all also a form of ill will, you know? And yet it's considered entertainment. Like, there's something really twisted about that. Did you have a question, Leonardo?
No.
Okay.
I'm just thinking hard here.
We haven't even gotten to the causes yet. This is the fun part. I'm still giving you the backstory. Okay, last one of the 10 non-virtues. Wrong worldview, right? The mistaken worldview. And the classic 2 wrong views is not believing in the laws of karma, actually, sometimes they say this differently. Sometimes it's said as not believing in the laws of karma and not believing in past and future lives. And sometimes it's said not believing in cause and effect and not believing in emptiness, right? Like, there's a couple ways to slice and dice this. The biggest one that Geshe-la wants to deal with in this explanation, though, is the karma thing. If you don't believe that what you say, think, or do is going to come back to you as a result, that is a mistaken worldview. And it's born of ignorance, and the result of that is we get more ignorant. And then we wonder why we're so unhappy all the time. So, there's also this societal thing where we think if nobody sees us, if nobody knows, then it doesn't matter. But karma, actually, I like Lama Marut's explanation of this. He says the karma cam is you. The karma cam is on 24/7, and it's you. And you can't get away from you. Anywhere you go, there you are, right? That's another saying. So everything you say, think, or do is recorded by this karma cam. And then it's saved, and it replays back to you. But because there's this time gap, you don't realize that it's your own movie you're watching. And the only definition of a bad karma, like the only thing that makes a thought, word, or deed bad, is that it will absolutely result in a bad result for you. And it's a good karma if it results in a good result for you. So that's really subjective, right? And it really goes far to motivating us to really learn what these things are, because we don't want bad results for ourselves, and we want good results. So, you know, this is what
So if something bad happens,
it's the result of a bad thought, word, or deed that was planted a long time ago.
but then if it turns into something, if that was the thing that got you to the place that's so good.
Give me an example.
Well, like say someone just about dies,
Okay,
right?
right?
And they're going along this particular path.
Yes.
And then it's that
Experience
that
that.
experience that's like, oh, okay, I have to change my life.
Right.
And then it becomes this very powerful thing, like
Yes.
where.
Yeah. Good example.
So,
Okay, so the reason they almost died is the ripening of past killing, actually. But the fact that they didn't die is the result of having taken care of others. And then the fact that they then have this epiphany and lived to be a better person is good karma that will bring them good results in the future. So there's actually a lot of mixed karma in that same experience. What we often mistake, though, is that the thing that came immediately before is the cause of the thing that happened. We think that the almost dying is the, well, I guess you could say it's the good thing, but it's not the almost dying that was the good thing. It was actually the learning, the realization that one could be different, right? And that lesson, like not everybody who almost dies necessarily has the same outcome. So a cause is only a cause if it ends up in the same result 100% of the time. And this is why we study this stuff, because what we are learning is to dissect the true causes. Because if you could figure that out, then you've got the secret to your happiness, right? And this is exactly the science behind what all of this is. So yeah, any situation you're in, like just give this very moment, like however you're feeling, good, bad, or neutral, is the result of a good, bad, or neutral result that you planted before. Where we get caught up is that there is a time gap between planting that cause, that's like gardening, it's between planting that seed and having it ripen, having it bloom, having it flourish, having it come up. There is a time gap, and there's no formula that we can give you for that. And sometimes that time gap is so long we don't even remember what the cause was. But actually, it's irrelevant in a way because you can know what the cause must have been given the result. And really, all we have are results. All we have is the present moment. And in the present moment, you're also planting new causes. You have control over the seeds you plant right now, and you have right now the results of all your past deeds, regardless of whether it was yesterday or last lifetime or the lifetimes before that, you know? So in the present moment, you can't change that ripening, but you can plant or replant seeds that will guarantee you a happier future. And that's what we're learning how to do. So we're going to move on to what the actual results are, because this is what we're interested in, right? Like, we're interested in knowing if I'm experiencing this result, what brought this to me, and B, what can I do to either replicate it if it's a good thing or stop it in its tracks if it's a bad thing. So the thing about the karmic results is that this is where we're going to get into these words, is that there are, oh, the other thing I want to say, and it's not in this course, but it has come up before, is there's different layers of reality. And karma is in the realm of, in Tibetan they call it Shintokokyur, deeply, deeply hidden. The actual causes for a specific result are deeply hidden. It's not something that we would necessarily logic. It's not something that we would necessarily be able to see without authoritative sources to say this leads to that 100% of the time. And because it's deeply hidden, it's important that we unpack how the ripenings happen. So say namin. Namin is Tibetan for ripening. So ripening is the result, okay? And there's actually 4 different kinds of karmic results from doing any of these 10. This is actually fascinating to me because if we could really understand this stuff, we would understand, we would have the answers to the question why. You know, as kids, we always go, why, mommy, why, daddy? And then you give them an answer and they go, but why? And they keep going, right? And then until they're finally, the adult gets exasperated and says, because I said so, or something to that effect. And there's never really a satisfactory answer. Well, here is the answer to every single question you've ever had about why. So, namin means a ripened result, and there's 3 flavors to this. If you do one of those 10 in a really big way, your next life is going to be in hell. And the Buddhist hells aren't any fun, let me tell you. If you do them in a medium way, it's the cause to be reborn as a preta, or a hungry ghost. If you do them in a small way, it's the cause to be born as an animal. So that's the ripened result of those 10 non-virtues. And then they say that even if you had the fortune to be, like if you had enough good karma behind the bad to not end up in one of those 3 lower births, is what they call them. Animal, hungry ghost, and hell are considered the lower births. If you had the good fortune to actually still be able to have a human birth, you are always going to have 2 other results. You're going to have gyuten. Say gyuten.
Gyuten.
This is the consistent causes. So there will always be a consistency to the There will always be consistency to the personal result you will have and to the environmental result. So not only who you are or how you are, but the world you live in is going to be affected. Okay? So I'm going to tell you how they're going to be affected. How's our time? I didn't bring a clock out. What time is it right now?
907.
9:07? Okay. I'll try and go through this and then we'll just take a quick break because I've been having you sit very long. I did tell you this is a big class, right? Okay, so the butane, consistent cause, number 1. Okay, so on your homework, for those of you who are doing homework, it's going to say, what are the karmic results? So basically, the ripening will always be in one of those 3 lower. However, if you have the fortune to be a human, then you're going to have these 2 results for each of those 10 non-virtues, okay? So I'm just going to go through those. So for the non-virtue of killing, which includes abortion, suicide, all that stuff, the personal result is, and there's always 2 of these, the personal result is your life is going to be short. You're going to have, life is going to be short because either you get killed or a disease will kill you. So you get sick easily. And you also have very little energy. So if you do suffer from low energy, a really useful antidote would be to really be extra careful about protecting life, your own and others around you, because you are one of those lives that need protecting, okay? But anyways, so we're not actually getting into antidotes. But the personal result of the first non-virtue of killing is that your life is short, which includes you get sick easily and you have very little energy. The environmental result, this is interesting. Food, drink, medicine, crops have very little effect. And they're always inferior. So even if you have food, it's not nutritious, it's hard to digest, or it causes disease in you. The other environmental effect is that most beings around you die before they can reach the end of a full life. So that's the environment that you're in as a result, as a karmic result of having killed in the past. Let's just go through all of these and then we'll deal with questions. Okay, the second one, stealing anything of value. And this includes the cheating on rent and taxes and stuff, Leonardo, but or underpaying taxes. So the personal result is that you don't have enough to live on or to make ends meet. The other personal result is what you do have is shared. Like it's common property. It's not yours to use by yourself. And the environmental results are that, again, back to, they say crops or the things around you, they don't have the power to remove hunger, and or they spoil, or things don't ripen the way they should, and it rains too much, or it's or it's drought, to the extreme, where like it rains so much that crops can't grow because it's all flooded, or it's so dry that nothing grows. And there are parts of the world, right, where there's been drought and famine for a long, long time. So the crops or they ripen at the wrong times. So that's from stealing. Sexual misconduct. The personal result is that everyone around you will be unreliable. Like in your work environment, in your personal environment, people will just be unreliable. And you will find yourself having a lot of competition for your partner if you have a partner. And if you don't have a partner, you will have a lot of competition for one. So the environmental result is you will be in a really filthy environment and everything stinks. Foul smells. The other environmental result is that everything seems unpleasant and distasteful. One of the things that some of my Dharma friends, you get really good at recognizing these things, and you go through areas of town that are really stinky, and you're like, take it all in because it's a ripening, right? Like, and you just like let it just ripen. See, if you know what the causes are, you can utilize situations that you find yourself in. Okay, the result of lying, giving someone a wrong impression, right? The personal result is that no one believes you, even if you're speaking the truth. The other personal result is that you will always find people are constantly deceiving you. That kind of makes sense, right? Like the result of you lying will be people lying to you. But that other one, where no one believes you, that one's a little bit harder to recognize that it comes from lying. The environmental result, this is interesting. If you have to work with others, you'll be constantly faced with your projects failing, and you'll be faced with people who can't work well together. You'll also be surrounded by people who are generally cheating one another, and there's a lot of reason to be afraid. So if you're in an environment that is very fearful, you're observing the result of lying. Divisive, the splitting up of people with speech. The personal result is that if you have friends, you'll lose them easily. People are constantly fighting around you, and you're surrounded with people who have undesirable characters. And the environmental result, this is really interesting. This is divisive talk, splitting people up, right? Your environment, your physical environment, the ground is uneven and split. Lots of highs and lows, so travel is difficult. And you're in an environment where there's many things to be afraid of. Harsh talk. The personal result is that you hear unpleasant things. And you hear harsh sounds. And it could be man-made, it could be animate or inanimate. Like if the sound annoys you, like if it really bothers you. Because sound is empty too, right? The same sound that really appeals to one person may not appeal to the other, like country music or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it can be, so again, remember the good or bad definition is what it is for you, not the thing itself, right? The environmental result of what was I just on?
Harsh talk.
Harsh talk.
Personal result.
The personal result was you'll hear unpleasant things, bad sounds, and it always sounds like people are trying to start a fight with each other, or people are always arguing around you. The environmental result is that the area, you'll find yourself with many obstacles to your path. Like if you're trying to get somewhere, there will be things in your way. And like broken glass, or that it's really rough and dreary. This is actually out of scripture. No streams or water springs, the ground is parched and poisoned, burning hot and threatening, and there are many things to fear. Fear comes up a lot in the speech, the downfalls of speech. Idle talk, meaningless chatter, criticism, disputes, useless joking, whining, complaining, all of that stuff, gossiping. Personal result is that no one respects what you have to say, or no one listens to you. And here's the most devastating thing about having the cause of idle talk is you are plagued by low self-esteem, lack of confidence. The environmental result is that fruits refuse to grow or grow at the wrong time. There's no leisure place where you are, like no place like parks and pools of cool water, and many things make you afraid. Number 8 was coveting. Another word for coveting is craving. This is the wanting what somebody else has. Even if you don't want, it's not necessarily that you want them to not have it. Like, you're perfectly happy if they have it, but you want it for yourself also. The personal result is that you are dominated by desire. And you're never satisfied with what you do get. That's actually the insidious thing about desire. And we're in the desire realm. We always want things. And we may be happy for a split second. But then sooner or later, that attraction fades and we want more. Like it's like the very getting of something triggers this insatiability. So those are the two personal results of coveting or craving. The environmental result, everything that you do manage to get that's good will deteriorate. And things get worse. So that's environment, that's experiences, that's kind of like a symptom of life, right? Of the human existence, this getting sick and old and dying thing. So that's a karma. And if we can switch up that karma, guess what, kids? Okay, ill will. To wish bad things upon others. The personal result is that you get actually, this ill will is the cause of having an angry personality. If your personality is dominated by anger, or if you know people who have angry personalities, they suffer from the results of ill will. And you will also find yourself without help. Never getting help when you need help, and finding yourself constantly hurting others. That's the personal result of ill will. The environmental result is that your world is chaotic, and there's lots of diseases, lots of conflict, lots of danger and fear from harm. And then the last one, wrong view. The personal result is that you will be ruled by stupidity, by growing ignorance, and you will be a deceitful person who keeps harmful views. See, this is the one that causes all the other ones, right? And then the environmental result is this is really, you'll live in a world where people think that things that are actually unclean are clean. And there will be nowhere to go and no one to help you and nothing to protect you. It's pretty dire.
An example of wrong view.
Not believing in karma, not believing in cause and effect, not believing that what you say, think, or do is a direct reason for the results to come back to you. So, an example would be thinking that cheating on your taxes is going to give you a big fat tax refund because that's the actual, like, you don't believe that cheating is going to lead to a bad result. Now, cheating on your taxes might not mean that you're going to get caught, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a bad thing happen to you later, where just when you need help, you're not going to get it, or someone's going to cheat you in the future, and like that. So not believing that that's going to happen would be a wrong view.
Nature recycles everything.
Yeah. And balance, right? Balances everything out. So, yeah. You know, and even as a semi-educated spiritual person, this would be a really hard one to not believe it. Like, you know, like to not believe result. Like, we all at a certain level believe in cause and effect. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here, you know? And like, nobody would put their kids in school because they wouldn't believe that the result would actually do anything for them. You know, like, why would you do anything? But that's the most extreme way. But subtly, people have wrong views all the time. All the time. You know, we believe that external things will bring us happiness. It's actually impossible, but we believe that. That's a wrong view. We believe that things come at us instead of from us. And we believe that all the time, right? We're constantly reaching for things to appease us or make us happy from out there. And remember I said these are the top 10 because we do them all the time, but as we get more educated in it, we can stop doing them in a way that harms us and switch it around because there's an antidote for all of these things, right? But Geshe-la wanted you to know the consistent and environmental results because it's one thing to observe how am I feeling today, which is a really good question to ask yourself to know where you are with your karma ripening. But it's really gets interesting when you start to notice the world around you and the noises in the gym and the traffic in the streets or the roadblocks or whatever it is, right? And to recognize it as a karma ripening, because actually everything is a karma ripening. But, and so that, therefore, everything is an opportunity to do something about it, right? And the better we get at this, the closer the time gap becomes between recognizing what the cause of the result was. So, that's that. Okay.
I have a quick question. Shouldn't A be personal? I'm just trying to understand the two examples you gave.
Consistent is personal.
Oh, consistent is personal.
And environmental is the other one. This is the way it's translated.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
It's the consistent personal result, and it's the environmental result.
Okay. It's terminology.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I have to give you another list, but it is 9:22, and we've been sitting. So let's just take a quick break. Grab some water. Use the bathroom. I'll put on some music if you just want to move around for a bit and get the energy moving. We don't have much more to go, but we'll just take a quick break and then we'll finish up.